This is Talking Drupal, a weekly chat about web design and development from a group of guys with one thing in common. We love Drupal. This is episode 285, Decoupled Menus. Welcome to Talking Drupal. Today we have several key members of the Decoupled Menus Initiative joining us. As usual, I'm Nick Laughlin, but first let me introduce our guests. Joining us for the first time is Batty, the current CEO and co-founder of 1x Internet, which is a leading European Drupal agency with about 50 employees. She's been working with Drupal since 2007 and started as a developer, but recently has transitioned to more of a Drupal editor. She's also a board member of the Drupal Association and has two kids that have over 50 Drupal company stickers in their room. I don't even think I have 50 stickers. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Also joining us this week, again for the first time, is Gabe. He's a member of the Drupal acceleration team at Acquia. He's been working on Drupal sites since college, and since then he's worked on a couple of Drupal agencies where he developed a passion for APIs and decoupled Drupal. He's contributed to the JSON API module and began working full-time on open source at Acquia, which means that he's never had a real job that wasn't working on Drupal-related things. Today, his son has turned 2.
All right.
Congratulations.
I tell him how to.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was trying to tell him how to say how old he was today.
You've been a successful parent for 2 years.
Yeah, so far so good.
Yeah.
And also joining us for the first time, we have a lot of Talking Drupal newbies today, is Liam. Liam is currently looking for full-time employment, and if you're a patron, you've heard John's pitch on the pre-show. He is 1 year self-taught and has already contributed to Drupal core and the README file, which is actually more than I think I have. I don't think I've ever contributed to Drupal core in code. So I'm gonna have to remedy that over the next couple of weeks. He's also worked on Tailwind CSS, which is becoming a really popular CSS framework, as well as the Starter Kit theme and Decoupled Menus Initiative maintainer. He's been living in Los Angeles for about a year, and he's rubbing in the awesome climate for the New England Talking Drupal hosts. Well, that was some introduction.
You made it. You made it.
I cut through it.
Good job, Nick.
Joining us, thanks. Joining us as usual this week, Stephen Cross with Parallax Info Technology. What's new with you this week?
Hey, nothing super new. I'm excited for my trip. As our listeners know, my daughter moved to Arizona, or I drove her there last July. And due to COVID, we couldn't see her for the holidays. So I'm going to visit her on Friday. So I'm super excited about heading to Arizona. Going to get some great weather and get to see my daughter that I haven't seen in 8 or 9 months. So it's a fun time for me.
Also joining us as usual is John Picozzi from Oomph Inc. What's new with you this week?
Coming to you for the first time in a long time without facial hair. For those of you that are watching the video, I don't have a beard anymore.
Is it a Zoom filter the whole time?
John, that was your best feature.
You know what? Not according to my wife. Many people loved the beard. My wife was not a fan. So it's about time. It's getting warmer. And let me tell you, the first day that I went outside and it was like 32 degrees without facial hair, I noticed it and remembered why the beard was there. Anyway, moving on to more interesting things. Been for about a year, jumped out of like Drupal site building as my kind of full-time job, doing more of the business dev stuff and doing more like hobbyist Drupal stuff, and have really enjoyed lately using Lando with the Drupal recommended project and to spin up demo sites. Super easy to get like a Drupal demo going. Was really pretty impressed how to do a demo for a client this past week. Installed did my Lando initiation, got Drupal recommended up and running, installed, set up the Umami demo profile, and was like off to the races, showing the client all the cool things you can do in Drupal. And then last night,
John, less than 30 minutes, right?
To get it going. Oh yeah. Totally. Yeah. I mean, I think the hardest part was, I'm on a Mac, and as Steven and Nick remind me, Macs are slow because they use Docker, blah, blah, blah. So if I were on a Linux machine, it probably would have been like 5 minutes, but I was on a Mac, so it was more like 15. And then last night I saw a tweet from Chris Wells talking about the Gin admin theme, and I was like, yeah, okay, I'm gonna go upstairs and get my laptop, and I'm gonna spin up a demo, and I'm gonna check out this Gin admin theme because I'm super intrigued now. Again, spun it up super quick, got Gin installed like literally an hour. I was like rocking Gin, playing with it, and sending people screenshots, and it was super fun, super easy. So I will stop there, but it's super useful, and you too can install Drupal super quickly, and you don't even have to be overly technical. Nick, what's going on with you?
Not too much. This weekend, I added to my Lego collection so people in the video can see. Right behind me, I finished the Lego Emporium, which is one of the first modular buildings. So it was a little bit more straightforward, but still a lot of fun. I enjoyed it.
Is that the one with the floors?
Yeah.
Yeah, it like has floors you can take apart and like play on the individual floors.
All of these are, but yes, that one is also one.
Cool.
So yeah, had some fun. It's been a while since I've done a Lego project, so enjoy my weekend doing that. Joining us, I guess I could say as usual now because it's been a few weeks. But,
as usual
Brian,
for the last time.
Yeah,
yep, I'm getting fired today.
And Brian with Bounteous, what's new with you this week?
Yeah, just the one thing that popped up into mind is a little something that's kind of been, as we've been locked in our homes, but are slowly starting to emerge out. Something that's kind of been keeping me going through this interesting stretch. One of my favorite bands is this band called Cloud Nothings. They're an indie rock band, and they actually early on in this wonderful year started a subscription service on Bandcamp, and they just release a new EP every month. And it's the first time I've, done like a subscription like that through Bandcamp. And it's really great music, but I also kind of like forget about it every month. And at the beginning of every month, I get an email like, oh, cool, 5 new songs I like. So it's just been really fun. And it was just kind of a cool way to, make lemons out of lemonade, I think, for a band that can't tour anymore.
That's
pretty
cool.
How about Batty, what's going on with you, aside from it being a very different time right now from the rest of us?
Yeah, it's like I'm getting hungry because it is not dinner time almost. No. I'm in Germany and we still have a lockdown. So there's a situation like going the kids to school, and they can go every second day, and then there's like all these type of issues. But generally Germany is just blooming in Drupal. And Decoupled Drupal, and I'm actually really excited to be part of this initiative too, because there is so much happening in Europe. At least I can only speak from the European market because I'm there, but there's so many great decoupled applications being created with Drupal, so many large enterprises that are using Drupal. So we are definitely seeing now in this lockdown situation where people need to digitalize, and Germany is not necessarily the ones that are the first when it comes to digitalization. When they do it, they really do it well, and it takes time. So, we are going through that phase at the moment in Germany. So I would say really weird times being at home, having the kids a little bit around and only seeing one person, because it's a lockdown, you can only see one person. And then at the same time, having business booming and hiring more people and all that. So I think it's a very weird combo that I did not expect 1 year ago that would happen. Let's say it like that. And it's still like this, and I don't know how long it's gonna take. Right. But I can know from Iceland, because I'm from there, COVID is we have a COVID-free country at the moment. So the hope is there. The only thing, the difference is Iceland can close the borders really easily. Right. but Germany cannot. So I'm still hopeful.
And Gabe, what's new with you this week?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just trying to take advantage of some beautiful spring weather. I moved out to the Asheville area last spring, and so this is kind of like my first tour through the whole season. So I'm trying to figure out if this nice weather is here to stay or if it's a fake.
It's probably, well, if you're a little further north, it probably wouldn't be here to stay. It's nice today, but it's definitely not here to stay in New England.
I at the grocery store told me I've got one more cold week to get through.
Makes sense. And Liam, what's new with you this week?
Yeah, so Los Angeles is doing a lot better now. They're getting ready to start reopening a lot more. This past weekend, I spent some time with my little brother who also lives in the area. We went to Santa Monica and we went to some malls and stuff, and it's just that buzz, of just being outside again does feel quite good after being, mostly confined to my apartment alone for quite some time. It's really nice to be able to go outside, and of course, as far as the weather goes, it's always nice here in sunny Southern California. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to these coming weeks. They're talking about maybe some indoor dining and stuff starting to reopen. So hope is definitely there indeed. Yep. So
yep. Yeah, looking forward to the vaccine rollout and things hopefully getting back to normal. Okay, well, welcome to the show. Before we jump into the main topic, could maybe the three of you just give us a quick overview of what your role is in the Decoupled Drupal initiative? Batty, maybe we can start with you. What do you do with the Decoupled Drupal initiative, menu initiative?
Sure. So my role is actually to help with onboarding and communication. So and maybe take some of that off the initiative leads and those who are maybe doing more of the coding part, because it tends to be like this, that the people who are leading the initiatives, that they need to do a lot of like communication. They need to help people to find issues and figure out what they should do. And we are now doing the keynote in Drupalcon, one of the keynotes there. So that is basically my role. And I think like Gabe, did we not just like create that role? I don't think we have it anywhere written that this is an official role, right? Except in our initiative.
Yeah, I think we invented it for the first time for kind of initiative structure, and it's been great. Kind of having someone dedicated to that role.
Yeah, so basically like so basically if you're listening and you want to participate, then you come to our Slack meetings, and then you can always ping me and you can say like, hey, how can I help? Or is there anything for me? And I can try to figure out if there's a way for you to help out. But at the same time, Gabe and Liam and the others can also come to me and say like, hey, we would like to have that and that. So this is something that we are really trying to establish that maybe could be the future for other initiatives as well, that there's somebody actually just dedicated, you could say product manager in that sense, helping a little bit with the communication, PR of it. That's my role.
So I can tell you from my perspective in organizing the show, reaching out to you, Batty, was super easy, and you coordinated getting everybody on board. I haven't had that same experience reaching out to other module or initiatives in the Drupal community. It's been a little bit confusing on who to connect to and how to make that happen. And you made this super easy.
Thank you.
It's exciting to see everyone's face here today talking about this.
Yeah. So maybe Gabe, you would be next, or?
Yeah, sure. So I'm one of the initiative leads. I try to focus mostly on the backend stuff. I have a previous experience being a coordinator for the API First initiative. So whenever kind of technical challenges come up or direction related to, what do we want the backend to do for these decoupled menus, I try and ask those questions and move that conversation along. And then maybe get my hands dirty on some code, hopefully.
And Liam, what's your role in the?
Yeah, so much like Betty, I help a lot with the communication side of things and like general project management type things where we try to make sure the issues are like we create issues for meetings. We work on documentation, and it's a very collaborative thing between myself and Baddy. We work a lot together, and it's really just to kind of try and take that burden off of the leads, of the initiative leads, so they can focus more on the really nitty gritty. And I'm also, due to my technical background, I'm able to sort of serve as a bridge. So between the technical side of things and then the less technical side of things. And I think it works really well for a project of this size and scope. Obviously, with a smaller project, you might not need 2 people to help with the communication and the things like that. But with this project, we found that it's got a lot of moving pieces, and there's a lot that we're trying to, do. And it's been working really well for us. Yep.
And maybe to just, one more thing that Liam was also leading in the initiative was a survey. So, we should maybe talk about that later on, but we did a survey and, where we basically sat down first together and we said like, what are we first, why are we doing this? Maybe we want to listen from or hear from others who are actually building decoupled applications with Drupal and other technologies. And we are just going to be putting that out, I think, just in this week. It's already ready. So we could give you some interesting facts from the survey here as a teaser. But we got like almost around 150 answers. And that was, asking just what are people using when they're building Drupal applications and so on. So let's take maybe, we can go deeper into that later on if you want to, or now.
Yeah, I'd be very interested to hear what those results are. But before we dive into the survey, I think we need to know what the initiative is. So Gabe, can you give us a kind of bird's eye view or elevator pitch? What is the Decoupled Menu Initiative?
Yeah, so it has kind of a cool backstory, which is, maybe over the last 5-6 years, JavaScript has just been on this kind of meteoric rise, and tools like React, Vue, and Angular, they've made the front-end developer experience a lot better, and you kind of reset the expectations for what you can do to create kind of beautiful applications. And at the same time, decoupled Drupal, kind of has been rising as an architectural pattern. And that allows Drupal to be used in many more contexts, not just for building websites. And one of the consequences was that front-end developers could come and they could bring the stack that they're used to working with, whether it's React or Vue or Angular, and use Drupal for its content management stuff. And that's all great, but it's not all sunshine and rainbows. When you go like on a fully decoupled architecture, you sacrifice lots of things that you get out of the box, whether that's menu management, authentication, views, blocks. And I think maybe some of those sacrifices is why, if you've heard about progressive decoupling, that's been a real topic of interest lately. But we don't really want that to be how, we don't want you to have to make that trade-off every single time you decide to build a decoupled experience. We want Drupal to be super great, even if you're bringing the front-end stack that you're used to Drupal. So there's a ton of work to do. So we said, what's one thing we can focus on and we can solve? And we settled on menus. And through making menus decoupled, we can solve a whole bunch of things. We can establish some patterns for how to move this big, container ship that's Drupal and move it in a decoupled direction, so that at the end of the day, you're going to be able to do fully decoupled sites and get all of the stuff you love about Drupal at the same time.
Now that we know a little bit what the initiative is all about, can you tell us a little bit about the survey? What did you find was most important to people as you're starting this initiative, Baddy?
Yeah, so what we actually started to do, we started just to ask basic questions like, for how many years have you been building applications, decoupled applications, and what technology are you using? So most of the people that answered had been using Drupal. So that's pretty obvious because we were also just sending this out in our network, which is mainly, of course, Drupal people, but we also got like answers from people using like WordPress, Contentful, Prismic, and other technologies. And then also like most of the people, they were using React and Vue. So I think Angular was less than 20 answers or something like that. But mainly there was actually people using React. So that was just to verify that that is also like that in our Drupal, when people using Drupal, but they are also using the same JavaScript frameworks as like are being, used out there. And I think you said something about that, Liam. I think there was, Vue was more popular, or what was it? Looking at the big JavaScript survey.
Yeah,
There were some differences.
Vue. Yeah, so there was actually a JavaScript survey that was done recently. I don't have the results right in front of me. One thing I do remember is they look at the trend lines and they look at how these frameworks are growing, and React is definitely there at the top still, but there's a huge amount of growth in some of these other ones like Vue.js, and even Svelte is another one that's up and coming. It's hard to say, how that looks a year from now, but it's something that is definitely important for us with this initiative to be aware of and make sure we're keeping on up to date with, because we need to kind of account for that, in a sense, with this initiative. We don't want to write something really. Ideally, we don't want to write something specific to a particular framework for that reason, and it's a very it's moving quite a lot. There does seem to be quite a lot of stability though with React and Vue.js, and those are the two major frameworks we've been sort of focusing on. And I think the survey just sort of validates that. So.
Yeah, and what the survey also validated in a sense, like, so we looked at like JavaScript tooling, npm and Webpack being like mainly used, and then of course like we also asked, what are you using as a API? And JSON API was the most used API format or data format, but also GraphQL and just a custom REST API. So we went actually just like through asking basic questions like, what are you using today? But then also going into like, what do you think like we should be building, or what do you need from a menu? And I think like, Gabe, we were talking about this a lot, like, what should the endpoint actually deliver to you, and how should the response look like? I think there was even an issue for that, and a lot of discussions, because people did not necessarily agree on, what does a menu endpoint look like? And I think like we try to ask these questions to see at least, that we are not going in a direction that everybody else is just disagreeing with, if that makes sense. Yeah.
It's interesting. I think the survey is keying in on some of the questions we have as we go through the show today as well. So from the beginning of the initiative, I'm curious as to when you started this, what were the key problems that you were trying to solve?
Yeah, I think it can be kind of confusing for newcomers when they wonder like, what are we doing? And I think we even started off with the name JS Menu Component Initiative, and we changed it to Decoupled. But the hard problem isn't really building a menu component, and it's not really, dumping menu data out into a JSON response. Those are fairly easy things, but we've got these hard problems, which is how do we make decoupled Drupal and menus attractive to non-Drupal front-end developers? And so we have to figure out, how do we do documentation that is familiar and understandable and approachable for them? How do we solve like the discoverability? Do we put it on NPM? Should we host our repositories on GitHub or Drupal.org? Is that important? How do we write guides? Do we need to ship JavaScript libraries for consuming that menu data to make it easier? And then, when we ship that menu data, is it just data? Is it like kind of getting a JSON representation of something like a paragraph entity? Or are they links? Are menus meant to help guide a user through your application? And that probably changes how we approach the problem. And then there's other kind of more technical problems, like what do we do about URL aliases? Menus point to those, but does your backend or your front end know about those aliases? And that's just kind of an example of the kind of things we're trying to discuss and figure out.
And maybe being in Germany or in our neighbor countries, we sometimes speak many languages in the same country, and actually that's an official language. So for example, in Switzerland, there are 3 official or 4, I don't know, official languages. So it means that like the menus also need to then, we need to deliver that as well. So if you're in Switzerland building an application, you're probably doing that in many languages. So your menu also needs to be delivered in different languages. And I think, this is one of the technical things, but it was really, what I felt was very difficult is actually just to understand and describe to others what it is that we're trying to solve. Because I think like very many people get really confused and they say exactly this what Gabe said before, but this is easy to do. I've done a couple of applications that have a menu. That's easy, but that's something more that we are doing. So therefore, like, how can people get involved in that? And that is like a challenge that you're facing every day, basically.
Do you feel like you've accomplished the mission, like communicating the mission of the initiative to the community?
No, not to the not to the large community.
Right.
But I have to say, still, Gabe participated in this great video that was that Dries used in his keynote now in Drupalcon Europe.
Right.
So if you haven't seen that one, look at that, because that was a really good way of trying to describe what we're trying to do. So, but I doubt it. People are not like going and looking at a Dries note every single day. So therefore, we need to still talk about it and describe it. So thank you for allowing us to be here today to tell that story.
Yeah, definitely.
So, obviously, decoupling is important, and it is a super hot topic right now. And, I guess maybe it has been for a little while, right? I'm just curious, why is this initiative so important to Drupal right now? And then does it also help kind of the getting off the island mentality that Drupal's trying to foster? And Gabe, I guess I'll ask you first, and then anybody else can chime in.
Yeah, I think it's incredibly important because, if you think about if you're Ford.com and you think about why you might want to use Drupal, and you think about how do I get my content out onto the web, Ford.com, like the website might not be super important to them, but having an app like a Mustang configurator that lets you choose the colors and whether you want pinstriping or the color that you want. And then you think about maybe you want to change like the terms of service on a touch screen in your car. You start to see that like there's all this content, the colors that are available or a typo in your terms of service that you want to get out into the world. And a website's not the only way you're getting content out. And so if we want Drupal to serve as this node, the central hub to let people in an organization communicate with the world in all the different ways that they're, all the different channels, Drupal has to be able to serve those. And Decoupled lets you say, I'm going to build an iOS application, or I'm going to build an Android one, or I'm going to build a website, or I'm going to do all 3 of those at once. Or maybe I'm going to put, a kiosk in a museum. Being able to solve those problems for any channel is really important, and I think to Drupal's future. Yeah.
Yeah, and I agree with a lot of Gabe's mentality and a lot of these things when it comes to what is the purpose here. And I think one thing we talked about before as well was, it's that we threw around the term making Drupal cool, like making it the cool thing,
Finally.
And it's one of those things that's sort of like, I'm a newcomer to Drupal, so I can bring this perspective. And that's something that I think has been a huge asset to the team with this initiative is I'm coming with a very fresh set of eyes, and I'm able to look at Drupal and say, and very clearly remember why I maybe avoided it previously and why it maybe wasn't as appealing. And, and some of these things like it not being on, it looking quite dated, the default theme, which of course nobody uses, but it's a thing, and it's and maybe the fact that it hasn't perhaps been as great for headless or decoupled applications, when there are other frameworks that do a really good job of that. And I think that what this initiative will do is start to change that and start to really just push things forward to the point where Drupal can be at the forefront, and it can compete with anyone else out there when it comes to managing content. Because one thing I've learned about Drupal very quickly is just how powerful it is at managing the content. So I just think it's a matter of having that layer that allows you to exploit that and to abuse that power that you have of taxonomies and the way the database is set up. Because I'm come from a full stack background, but databases are not something I like to set up, especially not to create my own content management system. Drupal's taking care of so much of that, and it's very security conscious and things like that. And I just think that it has some great potential, but there are some things that it's just sort of fallen behind, and that's the modern JavaScript world that I think we're really, hitting here. But then one thing that Gabe just pointed out was also the fact that content isn't always consumed through a website anymore. Content can be consumed through a number of different ways, and just the things that Gabe just listed, like kiosks, virtual reality headsets. I mean, it's just, the list is endless, and I think that to get to that point where we can say we have a really good REST API layer that works for a lot of different applications, including decoupled websites and applications, would just be really huge for us. And it's very small steps towards a much larger goal is what we're sort of doing here. And I think that's what's hard for people that are kind of new to the initiative is, we have it named in such a way that it does sound very narrow. But as Dries mentioned, when he initially announced the initiative, was that this isn't really about this. It's not really about decoupled menus as it is about setting a repeatable pattern that can then be repeated in the future. And once you set those things in motion, I 100% believe exactly what Dries believes, is that it will just sort of snowball, and we'll have an ecosystem. And we've really been making a lot of work towards that. We have general projects now on Drupal.org. These are things that kind of came as a result of this initiative, and it's something that Gabe reminded us of within the team. Is like, we might feel like we haven't made much progress, but like some of these pieces that have been put in place have been a direct result of this initiative, and it's something that worth thinking about and remembering it.
That actually kind of leads into some of the questions that I was wondering about. So we've actually talked a lot about, in some ways, kind of the non-Drupal things, like distributing this outside of our traditional ecosystem, communicating this project, why people care, that sort of stuff. But I'm definitely also interested in the impact that it's going to have on Drupal. We talk about some of those repeatable patterns. Like, what are some of the things that the team has been thinking about and the initiative has been thinking about that is actually going to be things that are going to have to change in Drupal? I'd be curious if there's anything there you could talk about.
Yeah, I'll jump in. So one of the things that I'm really proud of that we helped catalyze is the idea of a general project on Drupal.org. Right now, if you want to host code on Drupal.org, you kind of have to choose, is it going to be a module or a theme? And that doesn't work for JavaScript people. It doesn't work if you're Drush. It doesn't work if we want to ship a library to consume core menu data. So one of the things we kind of got the ball rolling on, push that snowball, was having these project types. We call them general project types, and they are hooked up to GitLab. You can push any kind of project there. And eventually we're going to be able to run GitLab CI. So you could do, say, jest testing for JavaScript, or do whatever you want, push to NPM automatically from Drupal.org.
And you'd be able to do that, any general project would be able to do that, publish to NPM through the CI process?
Yeah, anything you could do with GitLab CI, you'd be able to do on Drupal.org.
Cool.
So there is a project, it's called Once, so ONCE. If you go on drupal.org/project/once, and then you can actually check out the same project on git.drupal.org. You can actually see the test project that we are now using, or to show that this can happen.
And I want to point out something that might not be completely obvious about Once. The reason it was created was to be a replacement for jQuery.once, because jQuery is kind of going away. Or it's on life support. I don't know how to describe it. But the Once library, that general project, is a core project. It is not just a contributive project on Drupal.org. It's Drupal core. So that's kind of a mind shift that we have to go through now. Is that now Drupal core consists of more than one repository. There's not just Drupal core, the CMS. There's Drupal core, the Once library as well. And as part of that kind of change, Theodore, who couldn't be on the podcast today, and Sally Young are now provisional core committers, and they're bringing a JavaScript expertise to the core team.
It's definitely a big step in a different world, for sure. Also curious, thinking also a little bit about the component, the actual menu component that we're going to ship. Is the expectation that will still do kind of the things that we expect Drupal menus to be able to do, like, settings to just show children of a particular page, specific menu levels? Are we planning on kind of maintaining that sort of functionality in the component that we ship? Yeah,
so we're not planning to ship a JavaScript component from the initiative.
Okay. Well, there
we
you go.
renamed it Decoupled Menus. But it is a hard problem. Like, if you're decoupled and you've separated your presentation from your backend business logic, is the level of depth something that your component should handle, or should we have an API for that? We have to figure that out.
Gotcha. Well, that definitely is a good and important clarification that this initiative is not shipping a component, because I've been trying to follow along and that wasn't clear to me.
But there will be a little teaser. Drupalcon North America, there will be a hackathon, and we will ask people and those who want to contribute to that, is like to create actually components that then can actually use all this infrastructure and framework and everything that has been created.
Yeah, we can have an ecosystem of JS components.
Many components.
So just to dig into that a second, right? So you're not creating a component. People can kind of bring their own front end. So the initiative is solely decoupling the menu in the fact that it's providing endpoints for people to tie into. Is that the correct idea? Everybody's nodding their heads, so it must be.
Yeah, the endpoints, and if those endpoints, if we think there's some stuff that we don't want people to have to recreate, like how do I get this into a hierarchy so I can dump it into a JavaScript component, we will have JavaScript libraries that maybe don't render to HTML that help you consume those endpoints.
Got it. So it's like, hey, this is a child of that, and this is related to that, and I can get this through the API. One other question that keeps pinging me in the back of my head is, why start with menus?
Yeah, it's like we wanted to tackle this problem, one bite at a time. How do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? And menus seem to be like the most not necessarily the lowest hanging fruit, but like where we'd get the most bang for our buck. It's something where if you're a content editor and you call up your JavaScript developer who's built a decoupled site and say, I want to change the menu link about to history,
right?
Then if you don't have decoupled menus, they can't just go into the back end and change the text. The JavaScript developer is going to have to go do that in code probably. Rebuild their application, deploy it. It might have to go to a staging environment. And so menus are like so integral to a website, and yet you kind of give up that manageability for content editors.
Yep.
So we said that's where we're going to focus first.
Makes a lot of sense, right? Because it gives you that dynamic capability, right? Or perceived dynamic capability in your front end.
Yep.
It just makes me think that the Decoupled Views initiative is going to be absolutely wild.
So looking at so like we've been doing lightning talks. So that's also been being part of our communication strategy for the initiative, is actually to talk about what we're trying to do and allow people that are in our, contributing to the initiative to actually show us what they're doing. And one of the talks was actually what's going to come next. We talked about that. And there was actually a lot of ideas, because people were actually bringing in problems and saying like, hey, I need to solve this. And this is something that, what was it? It was like the authentication.
The authentication's a big one.
Yeah. And just generally like, user menus, there's all these things, views, where do you want to go next? I think that's going to be then easy, and it's going to be rolling when we're then done.
So yeah, I think it was kind of a revelation to me too that you're not shipping a component. Like I understood you were kind of fixing kind of the background to make that easier, but it makes a little bit more sense to me that you're just kind of providing the endpoint. But one of the things I'm curious about is, there obviously have to be structural changes for this initiative to be successful. Do you have any kind of idea of what those changes, how those changes will impact non-decoupled sites? Or is the plan for that to be fairly seamless?
I think we're trying to be as seamless as possible. We want it to be so that when you go build a decoupled site, you don't really have to explain anything to your content editors. You should just use the UI. These are the features that Drupal provides, and if we hook, the JavaScript libraries up to it, you're going to get all this stuff out of the box, even if you are building a decoupled site. I'll give you one example of like a structural change that I'm thinking about that I don't know that we will solve in this initiative, but maybe is on the horizon. If you think about how you actually get a menu on a page right now in Drupal, you go create your menu in the admin UI. You name it main navigation or whatever. You add a couple links to it, but you don't get it onto a page until you go to the block page and you create a system menu block. And you put visibility conditions on there and you say, if a user has this role, show it on pages with this content type. And you put it in a particular region via the theme. But on a decoupled site, you don't have regions. You don't have a theme. And so how do we kind of replicate that idea of context about, I want to show these menus for these users who have these roles on these content types. That's maybe a structural change that we're going to have to solve. So,
follow-up question to your example there, is that something that would be part of the the output or the endpoint, where you could say like, hey, this menu item is part of this, is part of this block or part of this region, or should be in this region?
Yeah, I don't know about the region bit, but I do think we want to have a way to communicate, show this menu in this scenario. Yeah, and maybe the way to do that is just to put the menu data on the response for a page. If you get an article and that article has a particular taxonomy term, maybe we just embed the menu JSON on that response. And it's very simple then for your JavaScript client to consume that. Just say, if it's there, show it. If it's not, don't.
Yeah, in my basic and like put everything in boxes head, I'm thinking like it would be really easy, or it'd be really useful for me to be able to use regions as Drupal uses them in my in my JS front end. But Brian can probably tell me if I'm way off base or if that makes sense.
It's a JavaScript front end. It can be whatever you want it to be.
Well, see, mine would be very structured and have regions that things fit into. Anyway, so I think everybody's aware that I think it was last year. My Drupalcons are running together, so correct me if I'm wrong. But last year Dries got on stage and said, "Hey, we're gonna do this Decoupled Menus Initiative thing." Yep. What I don't think is clear to everybody, and Batty, I'm gonna ask you as the communications person and Drupal Association board member. How does an initiative like this get started? Like where do the beginning ideas come from? Is it like Dries wakes up one morning and goes, decoupled menus, let's do it?
So good question. I actually, Dries is the project lead. So for example, just to make that clear that there is a differentiation between the project lead and the Drupal Association. So for example, the Drupal Association does not make these type of decisions of like, what to put into Drupal. But what definitely the DA does influence is the Drupal.org infrastructure and GitLab and all of that. And they, for example, everyone working on the DA has been helping us, for example, to get this all running. And that is, of course, then pushed through the Drupal Association in the sense of like, are they going to spend manpower and effort on actually making that happen? And is this important for the Drupal project that we have an infrastructure that works for this? So that is definitely like maybe a more of a board strategic decision, if that makes sense or not. But to the question of like, how does Dries actually make that decision? Probably Gabe knows more about that, being like longer as part of the core contributors and all that. I think you all meet regularly and you talk about ideas, right? Something like that.
Well, I'm not on the core team, so I'm not a core committer, but I'm sure that they have those conversations. A thing I'd like to clarify is that what Dries didn't say we're going to have a strategic initiative. He said, here's an idea for a strategic initiative. And if you guys like it, run with it. And we did like it.
So you're saying
so we
that
went to the,
he planted the seed? Is that what you're saying? Okay.
Yeah. And then there's what's called the ideas issue queue. And I think it's, I'm not going to give the URL, but there's a Drupal core ideas issue queue. And if you Google that, you could find it. And so what we did was we actually made a proposal in that issue queue. And I think Webchick and I'm sorry, I don't know who else is on the review team, but some of the core committers.
Tim Plunkett probably,
okay.
And somewhere.
Yeah, maybe. They're reviewing that and offering feedback like, have you defined your scope really well? Who's this useful for? Who are the stakeholders? And then that got approved, and that's kind of what officially kicked the initiative off. So anybody can propose them. It's not just Dries.
Hey Gabe, you said we. You said we submitted something to them. Like, how did that happen with you internally? Like, was this something that just resonated with you? What made you like step forward and say, hey, I want to submit this to that team?
Yeah. So I've been doing like JSON API development for a couple of years now and working on the API first initiative. And we kind of said that we need to wrap that up and just put a hard stop on it. JSON APIs and core. Yeah. And then I heard, what Dries said in his initiative. And during the Dries note, I actually just set up a Slack channel called JS Menu Component.
That's
and
amazing.
said, join it. And then
That's amazing.
I actually during that DrupalCon joined it and watched a doc be created to have brainstorming for what the initiatives could actually be. And apparently fell out enough that I didn't know that we weren't shipping a component. So here we are.
Took us a couple weeks to figure that one out.
No, a couple. I think it even took more. So and that is exactly so. The issue queue was then there, or the issue was there, and then we started to talk about the name and all that, and then we figured out like, is this name really working? And I think that was a discussion. I think we also met regularly then also because we had our Slack meetings then set up. So, and then people started to like participate more and more. And for me, for example, personally, we are seeing in Iceland, for example, that Contentful is just becoming so strong there, and Prismic in Scandinavia. It's because like it is so easy to use. And so for us, like for our company, it was like extremely important to like be part of this conversation. So that is actually why we decided, like, I said, hey, I want to be part of this conversation because I want to understand what is actually happening, because I actually have an opinion on that. From a business perspective, at least, I have an opinion on like, why is why is a system like Contentful actually being taken forward instead of using something like Drupal that is much more powerful? Well, because it's so extremely easy to use. And then I started to look at it, but does it have like menus that you can actually do easily? No, it doesn't even. You know, you have 3 ways of how to create menus in Contentful and so on. So I think it is like, it's this, you know, I think how many people have we in the Slack channel now? We're like a couple of hundreds.
We have 200,
and Brian, obviously.
200. Yeah, we got 256. I'm looking at it right now.
And Brian obviously being one of the people there, and I think it is a little bit like in the beginning, you just stick in there and you continue the conversation. And I think like I for example was really much passionate about that this should not be called JavaScript menu component, because I felt like, is that really our goal? Because there are so many menu components out there, JavaScript build. Why are we trying to build yet another one? And then some others were disagreeing with that, but then others were agreeing with that. And somehow we figured out like maybe we should use another name and so on. So, and this issue queue became really long. And then at some point, somebody said, who wants to be the lead? And then I think like Gabe, you, or somebody nominated you, somebody nominated Theodore.
It's interesting. So, Gabe started a Slack channel and things progressed from there. Batty, I appreciate you sharing kind of your background there. Liam, how did you get involved?
Yeah, so this was my first ever Drupalcon. I'd been invited I got a scholarship and everything to go to it and everything. I guess this was my first Dries note, and I was very in on the whole, decoupled hype train. Full on. And I saw this initiative. I'm like, oh yeah, definitely. And then, I guess it was Gabe posted the Slack channel in the chat, because we were doing it like it was a virtual conference. And I just immediately joined the Slack channel, and there was only a handful of people. And then gradually, I can't believe there's almost 300 people now. But I joined the Slack channel. There was a lot of conversations, and very early on, it was like we had this identity crisis very early on with the initiative. We didn't know what this initiative even was, and that's just the whole grassroots aspect of it, right? It's the fact that it's an idea. It was literally just an idea, and all we had to go by really was the Dries note and a couple of slides that we saw that we really liked, we really resonated with, and we had a lot of meetings where we were like going back and forth. And I, at the time, was also trying to, I'm very outspoken, but also I was trying to find a good balance between being a listener as well, because being new to Drupal. So I always try to find that balance between bringing my outside perspective, but also listening, because there are people that started joining the channel that had experience with, we've had people from the initiative that, where the Umami food magazine came from. There were previous initiatives that were very similar in the past, and there was some really useful experience that these people were bringing in, and we just started getting such a variety of people even early on in the Slack channel. And that's, I think, been key to the success, is having all these different perspectives, and then the ability to listen to one another very respectfully, and being humble and stuff. And it's really helped a lot to have and it's been great for me personally, even, I saw it as a great opportunity to just get involved with Drupal and to learn from people that know a lot more about Drupal than I do, being it's very new to me and everything. I now get to, work alongside people who have been doing this for decades. Right. And it's crazy. And it's really humbling, and it's really awesome to be part of. And I would recommend to anyone, to do the same thing. If you attend your first DrupalCon and you see a Slack channel appear, join it. If it's something you're remotely interested in, just join it. What's the worst that can happen,
It's super interesting to me, and super uplifting to me to hear how this got started. It got started with a Slack channel at a DrupalCon because Dries was like, hey, I have an idea, right? And
Yep.
You guys jumped in, and now you have a Slack channel with 300 people in it. It's super affirming in the power of open source. But I think Liam, you just answered this question, but I want to make sure we're spelling it out here. if somebody wants to get involved, is it as easy as jumping into the Slack channel and being like, hey, I want to be involved?
I would say, yeah. I mean, it's the community that I've found with Drupal is very much, if you want to help out, somebody like, Gabe and Baddy have been great, mentors and really helped me, personally to find things to work on. Hey, Liam, you want to work on this? Hey, Liam, you want to work on that? And it's just really given that direction and just help, and that's, I think, at the core of the Drupal community. Whenever you want to get involved in something, there's always someone there that wants to find something for you to contribute to. And it doesn't even have to be code. I've got credits for things that haven't even been code submissions, and that's just incredible to me that exists. And that's a really huge thing in open source, because that doesn't exist in a lot of other open source projects. You go work, you go to GitHub and you'll find issues and stuff like that. But the credits really only go into the people that are submitting the code and the pull requests. So it's a great community. Yeah. I think Drupal's a great community for that, for really fostering that.
So I want to add quickly to that. So what is really important is that there is consistency needed. And I think it says anywhere when you want to contribute to open source, it is like, you very often get like annoyed, I could say it like this, because you come and you have a lot of energy and you have a lot of ideas and you come and you say, I want to participate. And then you say, hi, I want to participate. And then nobody takes up on it because maybe somebody wasn't there and, not the right person was listening or whatever it was. So it's very normal, like it's in open source communities that then people get a little bit like, hey, like Brian, I don't know about you, but you were there and you were maybe trying to engage with some conversations and liking and something like this, but nobody was actually grabbing you and taking you and helping you to get through your first things. So in the one hand, like that's not good.
Yeah.
So let's
I could
try
have
to
easily
fix
been
that.
a Liam.
Yeah, so that's number one, like we have to fix that. And that is a little bit what we're trying to do here. So if you want to participate, come and say, we are going to have a task for you.
Hey, before we move on, I want just to highlight in the biography that we did early in the show for Liam, his says he's been involved with Drupal for 1 year and is self-taught.
Mm-hmm.
Just keep that in mind.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Listening to the show.
Yeah,
it's a great Drupal success story.
And his enthusiasm is infectious. Like he must be like the greatest guy to have on calls, because he's like a Drupal hype man. It's great. Yeah. I want him to come with me wherever I go and like hype the crowd before all my talks.
You're officially being changed to Drupal hype man now. So
hey, new title. I'll accept it.
So
I think actually, Liam, I think actually you said a really nice thing, because actually I have to admit, like Liam was not necessarily agreeing with everything in the beginning, which was actually really interesting. And what I shout out there in a good way is that Liam actually came and he asked the hard questions. So he came in there and he said like, yeah, but I don't understand this. Why are you doing it like that? Why are you not doing it like that? And why is that not? And these questions, and he did it in a very, very polite way, just like you said earlier, Liam. You have to do it in a way that you don't get, that nobody thinks that you're, trying to just be the negative person. Not that you were negative, but just think about that too. If you have an idea and you say like, rather ask it. And I think like Liam, your openness there was actually this like bringing the questions out that then just kept you ongoing asking those questions, which was really great for the initiative.
Yeah.
Excellent. As we're kind of getting to the end of our time here, but one question that I'd be interested in hearing a little bit more is just the general status of the project, where the initiative is now, and if there's any work that might be tied to the Drupal 10 release or anything like that.
So this is all new feature development, which means it's not going to block Drupal 10. It's not a like critical bug or anything like that. I think it's actually a really great time to get involved. We've kind of moved out of that planning phase. We've got the general projects now. We've got the committers now. We've got some of those patterns figured out, and we are getting down into brass tacks. We've got issues that are producing real code. So if you want to come review issues, that's a great way to get started and to learn and contribute at the same time.
Yeah.
Well, the good news is that we've established I'm already in the Slack channel. So
yeah. Even just being in the Slack channel, hang out. It's, we have Slack meetings and stuff, you can, and that's one thing that I really want us to be better. And it's something that Baddy brought up that, I want people to feel like every voice can be, heard, like if you see a thread in the Slack channel, you can always, I want everyone to feel like they can give their 2 cents. And it doesn't have to be agreed with, but just say it, just get it out there. And I think it really does help in the long run to have, multiple different perspectives, especially hard questions. I think hard questions are really important. And I'm not the only one that asks hard questions, right? Like it's a team effort. There's lots of people that come in and they ask, yeah, but what about this? What about regions? What about, and I think that it's things like that make me think, they make everybody else think. And we start to really sort of figure out some of the issues that we're really trying to solve. So, yep.
Hey, one of the challenges for any open source project is getting time from developers. So I'm wondering if you guys have had sponsorship from companies you work for or anyone else for your time dedicated to this project.
Some of us are definitely sponsored by our companies. And like there is always the same, if you are working for a company and you want to participate in something like that, please just go to your company and ask if you can get time to do that. Number one. So it doesn't cost anything to ask, at least. So we are very lucky in our initiative that we do have people that are being sponsored by the companies, but we also do have a lot of just volunteers doing it in their own time and, because they're just interested. So that is like the most difficult thing, of course, is to figure out like how can we get more companies to give time from people to contribute? Because also what is really important, because you actually said the word developers, and that is just like, I would say maybe 50% of the time people that we need is developers, or maybe even less. We need like project managers, we need people who are good in writing documentation. We have very few of those personas at the moment helping us with the initiative. We also need to get like JavaScript people that are not Drupal people. So we also have very few of those that just, that don't, the best would be that to have somebody that just doesn't know Drupal at all and says like, just give me the endpoint and it needs to work. So if you are a company and if you have resources that you can bring in, on sponsored time, the credits can then also always be sponsored by or credited by for, you can put your company name so the company can benefit from it and all that. So I would say, it would be great to have more of sponsored time always.
Yeah, and I want to be clear, like I'm just incredibly blessed because Acquia is, I was able to make the case that this was important and I wanted to work on it full time. And so I've been able to dedicate a lot of time paid to the initiative. So thanks to Acquia for that.
We appreciate anybody who's contributing and any companies who are sponsoring contributions. That's the core of an open source project.
Yeah, and the point is like always when you contribute to an open source project, for example, you take it away from somebody's time. You either take it from your company time, you take it from your family time, or you take it from your own free time, own sleep time, or whatever it is. So regardless of from whom you're taking it from, you need to actually, you need to speak to that persona that you are taking it from about it. And what you just need to make sure is that you're not taking it, we still only have the 24 hours in our time, that hasn't changed, even though we have a pandemic, it still is the 24 hours. So, we always try to say this, and we talk about this also, with the leads, that please also come and tell us if you can't come. If there is something that like nobody should have this burden on their shoulders, and therefore we also need more people, because if I get sick or if I just have to spend time with my family, I should be able to come and say, hey, I need to step out for 2 weeks, but can I still come back in? And in the meantime, Liam, can you take over? So we need to have this type of thing, established.
Yeah, it's great as a project lead if you can establish that environment where people can step out and not feel guilty about it as they do it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think we've been working on this a lot, at least here in Europe, in our volunteering things. We did this in Drupal Europe, and with Drupalcon Europe, we do the same. We always bring out these clear guidelines about that it's always okay to step out, and therefore we always want to have 2 people, 3 people. So therefore we need more. It is not just enough to have like 5, 6 people that are maybe doing most of the work. So therefore I always say there is room for everyone. And if you want to participate, or if you want to start just doing little things, like maybe, for example, now we're planning the hackathon for DrupalCon North America. We have a to-do list. We need to organize the React table and the contribution day. We need to organize the Vue.js table. We need to have people who help like with making code and how to use Drupal.org. And we need all these people. So if you think that you can help with anything of that, then you can get that task. Just come to us and ask for it, or ask or say what you would like to do.
Hey, if anyone listening has questions or feedback regarding this episode or any others, you can reach out to us on Twitter at Talking Drupal. You can also hit us up on the Drupal Slack channel at Talking Drupal. We get a lot of activity there. You can always email us at show@talkingdrupal.com. You can also get show updates weekly by signing up for our newsletter at talkingdrupal.com/newsletter.
And thank you to our patrons for supporting Talking Drupal. Your support is greatly appreciated. You can learn more about becoming a patron at talkingdrupal.com and choosing the Become a Patron button.
Is there anything that we missed? This was very informative. We appreciate you guys all joining. Is there anything that we missed in the show notes that we should cover? Looks like no. So if our listeners have additional questions or wanted to get involved, Batty, how could they get in touch with you?
So my phone number is
Nobody uses those.
Not only would it be
No,
your
I
first
know.
time, but it would be the first time somebody's actually given a phone number. So that's good.
Or actually calling you. Like nobody calls you anymore, except there is maybe for paying bills or something. No, so what you should definitely do, Drupal Slack, and we have there our channel. It's called Decoupled Menu Initiative. No, what is it? How there's Decoupled Menu Initiative. Yeah.
We'll get it in the show notes.
Thank you. So you just come in there, and we have our weekly meetings at 2:00 UTC time every Tuesday.
Wow.
And that's a Slack thread. And there we try to like highlight the stuff that we are working on. Otherwise, there's this like very lively conversations. And then once in a while and regularly, we do these lightning talks where you can actually also come and meet people that are working in the initiative live. And most important now, we are going to be at DrupalCon North America. That is happening now in April.
Yes.
So if you want to join, there's going to be the hackathon that we are organizing, where we are going to hopefully get a lot of menu components created and pushed into on Drupal.org. We are also going to be there with a short keynote on Tuesday, I think, talking about our initiative. We are going to be having buffs and contribution day. And so if you don't want to join before that, come to DrupalCon, and we are going to be there, and say that you want to join, and we can find something for you.
Great.
And Gabe, where can our listeners get in touch with you?
Yeah, Drupal Slack, I'm Gabe Solis. Twitter, Gabe Solis, and solis.com. So
perfect. And Liam, if our listeners want to get in touch with you.
Yeah, so a lot of my contact info is actually on my personal site. You can go to www.liamhockley.me. That has links to my email, things like that. You can always email me at contact@liamhockley.me. And you can catch me on Twitter. I don't tweet very often. I try to fairly often, but that's at xdiga the nerd. It's a weird one, but
Art.
And yeah, you'll catch me in Discord, and you probably won't miss me. You'll see me somewhere in the Decoupled Menus. My username on there is just Liam Hockley as well. I try to keep things consistent. So,
and also at Drupal Hype Man on Twitter, I believe.
Grab that
I'm actually about to change it, so stay tuned.
And Steven, where can our listeners get in touch with you?
StevenCross.com, as always.
And John?
You can find me on all the major social networks at John Picozzi, as well as Drupal.org. And you can find out about Oomph at oomphinc.com.
And listeners can get in touch with me at NixVan, NICXVAN. And Brian, how about you?
I'm Brian Comedy on Twitter, brianperry.dev on the web. And it's been really fun being here, everybody. Thanks for having me. Yeah, this was great. You guys were on a tight ship here. It's awesome. And I look forward to who's next.
Yeah. So Brian, thanks for joining us for the past month. And for our listeners, we have Shane Thomas joining us starting next week. So we're going from like one decoupled guy to another, right?
Yeah. Yep. Gatsby. It's gonna be a Gatsby all the time on Talking Drupal for the next month.
Hey, Brian, it's really been a pleasure having you here. Thank you for spending the time for us for the past month.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Absolutely.
Thanks for having me. It's great.
I will echo that. And if you've enjoyed listening, we've enjoyed talking. See you all next week.
Have a good one.